Statement, the Prime Minister.
Thank you. With permission, Mr. Speaker, I would like to make a statement on yesterday's European Council. But before I do, I am sure that the whole House will welcome the news this morning that the Metropolitan Police have arrested Julian Assange, arrested for breach of bail after nearly 7 years in the Ecuadorian embassy. He has also been arrested in relation to an extradition request from the United States authorities. This is now a legal matter before the courts. My right honourable friend, the Home Secretary, will make a statement on this later. But I would like to thank the Metropolitan Police for carrying out their duties with great professionalism and to welcome the cooperation of the Ecuadorian government in bringing this matter to a resolution. Mr. Speaker, this goes to show that in the United Kingdom no one is above the law. Turning to the Council, my priority is to deliver Brexit and to do so in an orderly way that does not disrupt people's lives. So I continue to believe we need to leave the European Union with a deal as soon as possible. And of course this House has voted repeatedly to avoid a no deal. Yet despite the efforts of members on all sides, we have not so far been able to vote for a deal. So ahead of the Council, I wrote to President Tusk to seek a short extension to the Article 50 period to the 30th of June. Critically, I also requested that any extension should be terminable, so that whenever this House agrees a deal and ratifies the withdrawal agreement, we can get on and leave. And I did this not merely to avoid a further delay beyond ratification of the withdrawal agreement, but specifically to retain our ability to leave the EU without having to hold European parliamentary elections on the 23rd of May. Mr. Speaker, the discussions at the Council were difficult and, unsurprisingly, many of our European partners share the deep frustration that I know so many of us feel in this House over the current impasse. There was a range of views about the length of an extension, with a large number of member states preferring a longer extension to the end of this year or even into the next. In the end, what was agreed by the UK and the EU27 was a compromise, an extension lasting until the end of October. The Council also agreed that we would update on our progress at the next meeting in June. Critically, as I requested, the Council agreed that this extension can be terminated when the withdrawal agreement has been ratified. So, for example, if we were to pass a deal by the 22nd of May, we would not have to take part in European elections, and when the EU has also ratified, we will be able to leave at 11 p.m. on the 31st of May. In short, the date of our departure from the EU and our participation in the European parliamentary elections remains a decision for this House. As President Tusk said last night, during this time the course of action will be entirely in the UK's hands. In agreeing this extension, there was some discussion in the Council about whether stringent conditions should be imposed on the UK for its EU membership during this period, but I argued against this. I put the case that there is only a single tier of EU membership with no conditionality attached beyond existing treaty obligations. The Council conclusions are clear that during the course of the extension, the UK will continue to hold full membership rights. In turn, I assured my fellow leaders that the UK will continue to be bound by all our ongoing obligations as a member state, including the duty of sincere cooperation. The United Kingdom plays a responsible and constructive role on the world stage, and we always will. That is the kind of country we are. The choices we face are stark, and the timetable is clear. I believe we must now press on at pace with our efforts to reach a consensus on a deal that is in the national interest. I welcome the discussions that have taken place with the opposition in recent days and the further talks which are resuming today. This is not the normal way of British politics, and it is uncomfortable for many in both the government and opposition parties. Reaching an agreement will not be easy, because to be successful it will require both sides to make compromises. But however challenging it may be politically, I profoundly believe that in this unique situation, where the House is deadlocked, it is incumbent on both front benches to seek to work together to deliver what the British people voted for. And I think that the British people expect their politicians to do just that when the national interest demands it. I hope that we can reach an agreement on a single unified approach that we can put to the House for approval. But if we cannot do so soon, then we will seek to agree a small number of options for the future relationship that we will put to the House in a series of votes to determine which course to pursue. And as I have made clear before, the Government stands ready to abide by the decision of the House, but to make this process work, the opposition would need to agree to this too. With the House's consent, we could also bring forward the Withdrawal Agreement Bill, which is a necessary element of any deal, whichever course we take. This bill will take time to pass through both houses, so if we want to get on with leaving, we need to start this process soon. And it could also provide a useful forum to resolve some of the outstanding issues in the future relationship. Crucially, Mr. Speaker, any agreement on the future relationship may involve a number of additions and clarifications to the political declaration. So I'm pleased that at this Council all 27 Member States responded to my update on the ongoing cross-party talks by agreeing that the European Council is prepared to reconsider the political declaration on the future relationship in accordance with the positions and principles stated in its guidelines and statements. The Council also reiterated that the withdrawal agreement itself could not be reopened. Mr. Speaker, I know the whole country is intensely frustrated that this process to leave the European Union has not still been completed. I never wanted to seek this extension, and I deeply regret that we have not yet been able to secure agreement in this House for a deal that would allow us to leave in a smooth and orderly way. I know too that this whole debate is putting members on all sides of the House under immense pressure and causing uncertainty across the country, and we need to resolve this. So let's use the opportunity of the recess to reflect on the decisions that will have to be made swiftly on our return after Easter, and let us then resolve to find a way through this impasse, so that we can leave the European Union with a deal as soon as possible, so that we can avoid having to hold those European parliamentary elections, and above all, so that we can fulfil the democratic decision of the referendum, deliver Brexit and move our country forward. This is our national duty as elected members of this House, and nothing today is more pressing or more vital, and I commend this statement to the House.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to thank the Prime Minister for an advance copy of her statement. Mr. Speaker, yesterday EU leaders agreed to grant the United Kingdom an Article 50 extension to the 31st of October. This means that Britain will now have to start the process of holding European elections in the extraordinary situation of not knowing whether new MEPs will take their seats or for how long. This has come just 3 weeks after the Prime Minister told the House she was not prepared to delay Brexit any longer than the 30th of June. The second extension in the space of a fortnight represents not only a diplomatic failure, but is another milestone in the government's mishandling of the entire Brexit process. A measure of this could be seen in this House on Monday, when 1/3 of her party voted against her own policy to request a short delay and 4 of her cabinet members abstained. And can the Prime Minister also confirm that the request by the Leader of the House on Tuesday for the EU to reopen the withdrawal agreement has also been rebuffed? The Prime Minister stuck rigidly to a flawed plan, and now the clock has run down, leaving Britain in limbo and adding to the deep uncertainty of business, workers and people all across this country. Mr. Speaker, I welcome that the Prime Minister finally decided to reach out to the opposition last week and open talks to try and find a breakthrough. The fact that the invitation didn't even come at the 11th hour, but at 5 past midnight, 3 days after the Prime Minister had missed her own Brexit deadline of the 29th of March, is a reflection of the government's fundamental error in not proceeding by consensus. However, Mr. Speaker, I can report to the House that the talks now taking place between the opposition and the government are serious, detailed and ongoing, and I welcome the constructive engagement that we've had. Although this view may not be universally shared by many on the Conservative benches, I also welcome the indications from the government they may be willing to move in the key areas that have prevented the Prime Minister's deal from being supported on this side of the House. If these talks are to be a success, resulting in an agreement to bring our country back together, the government will have to compromise. That is why it is with disappointment that I read the Secretary of State for International Trade's letter this week, in what seemed to be an attempt to scupper meaningful talks by all but ruling out Labour's customs union proposals. A proposal, I might add, which is supported by business and industry bodies as well as by all leading trade unions in this country. It is a proposal that European Union leaders and the Irish Taoiseach just yesterday have said is both credible and negotiable. Labour will continue to engage constructively in talks because we respect the result of the referendum and we are committed to defending jobs, industry and living standards by delivering a close economic relationship with the European Union and securing frictionless trade with improved rights and standards. If that is not possible, we believe all options should remain on the table, including the option of a public vote. And, Mr. Speaker, we see no advantage in the proposals of the Secretary of State for International Trade to create distance and divergence in our trading relationship with our largest trading partner. This House must also bear in mind that after a deal has passed, the current Prime Minister said she will step down. We have no idea who may succeed her. So with that in mind, we have to entrench any agreement, because some of those already throwing their hats into the ring have said they would scrap the Human Rights Act, they would rip up burdensome regulation, or would even prefer to leave without any deal at all. Some on the Conservative benches want nothing more than to use Brexit to create a race to the bottom, opening up our economy to US big pharma companies in our National Health Service, hormone-treated beef on our plates, slash workers' rights and consumer standards, and to have the UK become a virtual tax haven on the shores of Europe. Let me be clear to the Prime Minister and to the country. Labour will not support any deal that would leave us open to such a dystopian vision for the future of this country. It is incumbent on all of us now to find a way forward. We must continue to talk to each other, and if the government is serious, the red lines must move and we must see a real compromise. I look forward to the discussions in the coming days, and even at this late stage, to work to find a deal that can command not only the support of this House, but, perhaps more importantly, the support of the public across this country too.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And can I say to the Leader of the Opposition that the talks between the Government and the Opposition have indeed been serious. They are detailed and they are being taken forward in a constructive and positive fashion. We did, of course, offer talks at an earlier stage than very recently, but I'm pleased that we are now able to sit down in this way. He raised the issue about the European parliamentary elections. Of course, had members in this House voted with a majority to agree the withdrawal agreement on the 29th of March, we would have guaranteed leaving on the 22nd of May and not holding the European parliamentary elections. At the time, obviously, the Right Honourable Gentleman didn't feel able to support a deal to enable us not to hold those European parliamentary elections. It is still possible to do so, and we will continue to work on that. He talked about the need for us to protect jobs, industry and living standards, and indeed that is what we have been aiming to do with the deal that we agreed with the European Union. But not just in relation to the deal with the European Union. Actually, it is this government that has presided over record levels of people in employment. It is this government that has seen helping people with their living standards with tax cuts for 32 million people. He talked about the future relationship and the need to entrench aspects of the future relationship. Of course, the government did on the 29th of March say that we would accept the amendment that was put down on the order paper by the honourable member for Stoke-on-Trent Central, which would require Parliament to have that role in looking at the future relationship and the negotiating objectives for the future. And what that clearly makes the case is that any government, as it's going through those negotiations, will of course have to ensure that they are taking Parliament with them in agreeing that future relationship. And on the issue of coming together in an agreement. The point is very simple. I'm not prepared just to accept Labour's policies. The Labour Party isn't prepared just to accept our policies. As the honourable gentleman, the member for Holborn and St Pancras, has said, this takes compromise on both sides, and that's what we're doing, sitting down seriously to find a way that enables this House to ensure that there is a deal that commands a majority, so we can leave the European Union, fulfil the vote of the British people in 2016 in the referendum, and do so in a way that does indeed protect jobs and living standards and industry.
Mr Kenneth Clarke.
May I urge my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, to stick to her commitment to lead the country through to the conclusion of the Brexit process and to ignore some of the vicious attacks being made upon her by our more extreme right-wing colleagues. Can I also ask her, given that she rightly points out in the national interest that the next obvious step is to reach a settlement between the government and the principal opposition party on the best way forward, can she indicate that it is clear that the minimum that requires is some sort of customs arrangement and sufficient regulatory alignment, at least to keep our trade as open and free as it has been across the Channel and in the Republic of Ireland? And can she negotiate that so it does actually bind any successor government in future negotiations?
My right honourable learned friend is right that, of course, as we look to that future relationship, we are looking at the customs arrangement that would be in place in that future relationship. We have already indicated, as is reflected in fact in the political declaration, that we want to retain the benefits of a customs union, of no tariffs, no quotas, no rules of origin checks, and that is provided for in the political declaration. Stands. Of course, what we do see is we haven't been able to enshrine that in legal text, because it's not possible for the European Union to negotiate that treaty with us until we're a third country, until we're out of the European Union. So any commitments that are made here will be about the negotiating objectives that we take through into that process, but there will still be negotiations to be had with the European Union. But in terms of adding to and clarifying what is in that political declaration and the position of the UK government. Obviously, as I've indicated, the EU Council have said that they would be willing to look at additions and clarifications to that political declaration.
Ian Blackford.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and can I thank the Prime Minister for advance sight of her statement. Mr Speaker, what a total fiasco the past few weeks, months and years have been under this shambolic Tory government. The UK did not leave the EU in March, and thankfully, given the efforts of SNP politicians and others in this place, and the goodwill of the European Union, we will not crash out of the EU on Friday. What an irony that it's the European Union that's got the UK out of this mess. Let that be a lesson for members in this place. It is the EU that has put the interest of our citizens in the UK first, our businesses, our farmers and our fishermen. We should not be lambasting the EU, we should be thanking them. With the European Union agreeing to a further extension to Article 50, the Prime Minister must use this time to hold a second EU referendum with the option of remaining on the ballot paper. It is now a very real possibility that we can remain in the European Union. Mr Speaker, there were a total of 133 days between the 1997 general election and the devolution referendum in Scotland. As of today, there are 204 days until the new Brexit deadline on the 31st of October. So will the Prime Minister now remove the ridiculous excuse that there isn't enough time to hold a second referendum with Remain on the ballot paper? Scotland did not vote for Brexit and should not be forced to accept any Brexit deal that will harm our interests. The only way forward is to put the decision back to the people. Scotland will not support a Brexit deal cooked up by the Brexit-supporting Labour and Tory parties. So, Mr Speaker, let me ask this. Prime Minister, yesterday you ducked and dived my questioning, so a simple yes or no will suffice. Has your government offered a second EU referendum in talks with the Labour Party? Yes or no?
No.
Has the Labour Party requested a second EU referendum in the talks? Yes or no? Is the Labour Party cozying up to the Tories, asking to end freedom of movement as a price for their support for a Tory deal? Yes or no? And finally, Mr. Speaker, will the Prime Minister recognise that she cannot fix this mess alone? Stop ignoring the people of Scotland. Open up meaningful discussions with the devolved governments and with civic society. Start leading by listening, Prime Minister, and please get her head out of the sand.
I say to the right honourable gentleman, the government has not offered a second referendum. And our position, I said to him yesterday in PMQs that our position on that issue had not changed. A second referendum has been rejected twice by this House. But of course, when legislation goes through, once we've agreed a deal and legislation is going through for the bill that puts that in place, I'm sure there will be members of this House, because there are members who do support a second referendum, who will want to press their case during that legislation going through. I continue to believe, it's not an excuse, there isn't an issue of excuse about timing. I believe that it's important for us to deliver on the first referendum that took place in 2016 on the result of that. And can I just say to the right honourable gentleman, if he's so interested in referenda, the question is, will he now abide by the result of the 2014 Scottish referendum? Yes or no?
Sir William Cash.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, appreciate the anger that her abject surrender last night has generated across the country, having broken 100 times promises 100 times not to extend the time? She knows what I'm saying, and she's done that. Does she also accept that this withdrawal agreement undermines our democracy, the constitutional status of Northern Ireland, our right to govern ourselves, control over our laws, and undermines our national interest? Will she resign?
Can I say to my honourable friend, first of all, I do not recognise the description of the withdrawal agreement that he has put before this House. I believe we have negotiated a good deal for the United Kingdom. He references the fact that he's absolutely right, on many, many occasions in this House, and he and other members of my honourable friends have been keeping count. I had said that I wanted us to leave the European Union on the 29th of March, and indeed I did. I voted for the UK to leave the European Union on the 29th of March. I wanted us to set in train that guaranteed leaving on the 22nd of May. I voted to leave on the 22nd of May. Sadly, not sufficient number of members across this House voted to leave the European Union on those dates, and hence the extension has been requested to enable us to come to a position where this House can agree on a majority on a deal that we can then deliver on leaving the European Union.